Hey guys, welcome to eMath. Welcome to another episode of Math Talk, which one will be doing hardcore math. And today we'll be talking about whether it is rational to believe in God, even if the chances of God's existence is low. Remember once upon a time your mom told you that you have to finish your rice so that your wife's face will not be full of pimples? And remember the time you set your watch 5 minutes ahead so that you have time for checking during your exam? We all engage in these kind of lies, or you may call them useful fictions, which are the things that we choose to believe simply because they make our life easier. And when we do this, we are being pragmatists. Pragmatism is an approach that evaluates theories or beliefs in terms of the success of their practical application. In this view, finding the true beliefs is less important than finding beliefs that work practically in our daily life. It doesn't matter if your wife's face is full of pimples next time, as long as you are convinced to believe that you should finish your rice right now. That is good enough to be considered as a useful belief. Personally, for me, I think that the existence of God is a definition by itself to begin with, which can't really be proven without the prior assumptions that God exists and God created us. At the moment, I would say that it is nearly impossible to prove the existence of God scientifically, mathematically, or even philosophically. So what's important becomes the act of believing in God, which choice gives us a better life and or better afterlife. And here's where the pragmatism comes in. Our entire discussion today will be built on the assumption that pragmatism leads us to the best choice, and that's what Pascal proposed. The funny thing is, Pascal didn't even try to argue that God's existence is likely than not. Instead, he lifted an approach from the gambling hall and argued that given the odds and potential payoff, believing in God is really a good deal, even if the chances that God actually exists is low. Before we begin, it's time for some math. Yeah, I know you have been waiting for this. Anyway, imagine that you are about to buy a lottery, and suppose there are 100 tickets at $1 each and a jackpot of $1,000. Is it rational to play? To answer that, we'll use the decision theory, which is a mathematical theory about how to arrive at the decision that are the most advantageous given an uncertain environment. So based on the decision theory, given the prices of the tickets are fixed, we should focus on two things. First, what is the chances of winning? And second, what is the value of winning? Obviously, one would say that the higher the chances of winning, the better the deal. And if the chances of winning is fixed, the higher the value of winning, the better the deal. Now come back to the lottery. If you try to find the net sums of the earnings and the expenses for all the tickets, which is $1,000 minus $100, then divide by the number of tickets, which is 100, you'll find that on average, each ticket nets $9. On the other hand, not playing involves zero expense and zero payoff. Decision theories say that it is rational to play simply because $9 is more preferable to $0. Now, if there are 10,000 tickets at $1 each and the same jackpot of $1,000, then the total earnings and expenses becomes $1,000 minus $10,000 divided by 10,000 tickets, and on average, each ticket will yield a 90 cents of net loss. Hence, it is irrational to play. Notice that what we did here is reduce the chances of winning. So if the chances of winning is low, usually it becomes a worse deal. However, if we increase the value of winning, which means we increase the price of the jackpot, say $1 million, then we have $1 million minus $10,000 divided by 10,000 tickets, which is a $99 profit from each ticket on average, which is definitely a good deal again, even if the chances of winning is only 1 out of 1 million. A little recap on what we have established so far. As we can't prove the existence of God, it is more pragmatic to choose the beliefs that work practically in our daily lives. And according to decision theory, a good belief is the one that has a higher chance of being true and has a higher returning value. But since we are being pragmatic here, we can cancel off the first condition. And we only have to show that the value of believing in God is greater than not, regardless of his existence. This reasoning is known as Pascal's wager. And personally, I feel that this is really a gambler's approach for religious belief. There are three main arguments to support Pascal's wager. First, the superdominance argument. Assuming that it is true that we can go to the heaven, enjoy eternity, if we believe and give ourselves to God. This is how Pascal set up the situation. Either God exists or does not exist, and either we believe in God or do not believe in God. If God exists and we believe in God, we will be rewarded with an eternity of bliss in the heaven. But if we don't believe in God, we will be suffering forever in the hell. So obviously, if God does exist, it is better off to believe in God. But what happens if God doesn't exist? These can still enjoy finite happiness before they die, say 100 units of happiness for example, while atheists will enjoy finite happiness too. Maybe not so much because they will experience angst rather than comforts from religion and the religious community. Let's say it is 80 units of happiness. So based on this argument, regardless of whether or not God exists, this will have it better than atheists. Hence, believing in God is a more rational choice. But what if we look at the extreme cases? The theist is a miserable, superstitious person who is willing to harm himself or even start a war in the name of God, whereas the atheist is a happy hedonist who thinks that his purpose of life is just to enjoy. Here we have our second argument, the expectations argument. So if God doesn't exist, and in the case where believing in God grants us less happiness than not believing in God, say 10 units and 90 units, then the superdominance argument no longer works. Let's say there is a 50% chance that God exists, 0.5 times infinity is still infinity, 0.5 times negative infinity is still infinity, half of 10 is 5, and half of 90 is 45. Now, what is expected happiness that we can gain from believing in God? It is infinity plus 5, which is still infinity. Whereas the expected happiness that we can gain from not believing in God is negative infinity plus 5, which is still negative infinity. So regardless of the values in this column, positive or negative, it is always finite. And regardless of the chances that God exists, as long as it is not 0, multiplied with an infinity, still gives us an infinity. With that, we have our third argument, the dominating expectations argument. Well, it is unlikely that the probability that God exists is exactly 50%, no matter how you look at it, right? But it doesn't matter. Like I said, as long as the probability of God's existence is not 0, these columns will always have finite values, and this infinity will swamp the value in the next column. So we still get the result at the end of the day, which is believing in God is a better deal. If you are a Gnostic atheist, you may feel that something's fishy with this reasoning, and I will tell you that it's true, because we make too much assumptions along the way, assuming that pragmatism is what all humans want, assuming that we can go to the heaven if you believe in a God that exists, and assuming that you will suffer eternally in hell if you don't believe in God. Then one might say that, hey, isn't it normal to start with some definitions and assumptions, just like how we define 1 plus 1 equals to 2 with piano axioms to establish that 2 plus 2 equals to 4? Well, we can't simply make assumptions just to reach conclusions that we want. Just like we can't assume that pi equals to 4 to say that the area of this circle is the same as the square. That's absurd. On the other hand, if you are a Gnostic theist, you may also disagree with the reasoning because it is killing what is great about religion. We should focus on our relationship with God rather than the so-called benefits that we can gain from believing in God. I have three arguments here. One, is believing in God just a matter of choice? If you start going to church because you are convinced by Pascal's wager, will you become a fake believer that will end up in the hell? Number two, is it morally just to believe in something without evidence? Notice that in this version of Pascal's wager, we don't actually care about whether God exists. Will that change the meaning of believing in God? Or should we blindly believe in God just because the expected payoff is higher? And lastly, number three, there are too many religions out there. Your heaven might be my hell because some gods, if they exist, would punish believers of the other religion. So you could draw a table like this, or even this. And fun fact, infinity minus infinity is indeterminate. So proving without evidence is definitely convenient, but very risky at the same time. After all, if we can leap to Jesus, we can also leap to Allah, and even the flying spaghetti monster. At the end of the day, if you give up on reasons and evidence, all beliefs are philosophically equal. I would like to end today's video with some math, obviously, specifically with logical reasoning. Pascal's wager is basically built upon these two premises. One, if God exists, being a believer is better than a non-believer. Two, even if God doesn't exist, being a believer is better off than being a non-believer. And the majority of the objections are arguing that whether premise 2 is true. If you are interested in how Pascal responded to those objections, I strongly recommend you to read his book, which explains what is exclusive about Christianity. Of course, there are tons of insightful videos debunking his theory, which are also worth watching. But at the end of the day, I still appreciate Pascal for bringing up such an interesting argument, and I believe that all humans, including myself, are on our way to the truth. Alright, that's all for today. Thanks for watching. See you guys in the next video.